Hello and welcome. I'm Chaiti, Narula, and you're watching the Policybazaar show. 2020 has left us with a special message. Take care of your health. Look after yourself and be completely prepared for emergencies and financial shocks during the unprecedented crisis so you can take care of yourself and keep your families protected. Health insurance is necessary for every individual, keeping in mind the rising medical costs and the spread of lifestyle diseases amongst Indians. A medical emergency can attack anybody, anytime, and impact an individual not just emotionally but also financially. Today's topic, health insurance, a must to combat rising medical costs. And joining me today to discuss more on this, we have Abhay Singhvi, Chief Business Officer, Healthians. Abhay brings with him 14 years of leadership experience across complex cross-functional healthcare operations ranging from rural clinics to tertiary care private hospitals. Abhay has also led key strategic initiatives covering clinical outcomes, service excellence, operation optimization, business innovation, and a variety of leadership roles at Medanta for the past 7 years. He was also the youngest CEO in the healthcare industry that he served at Narayana Health as CEO Preventive Health. Welcome to the show, Abhay. What a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Chaiti. The pleasure is all mine too.
And joining Abhay today, we have with us once again Amit Chhabra, the Health Business Head, Policybazaar.com. Amit has over 10 years of work experience across top-tier management consulting firms and high-growth startups in India and the United States. His past portfolio includes consulting focused on strategy engagements in telecom, in media, technology space in India and the US markets. The key areas of expertise include corporate and business unit strategy, growth strategy, product strategy and innovation. Welcome to the show, Amit. As always, what a pleasure to speak to you and have you on the show.
Thank you.
So let's start off today's discussion. My first question is for Abhay. Abhay, we have seen a significant rise in cost of healthcare in the last decade. The average healthcare inflation rate is as high as 14% in India. What, according to you now, are the three primary reasons behind the high medical inflation in India?
Right. I think healthcare has been seen a significant rise. I kind of second that. One of the primary reasons for that is the demand and supply gap. So we have about 12 lakh private beds for almost a population of 130 crores. So by default, where you see a demand and supply mismatch, there's a cost rise. Second reason here that we see is more and more access to advanced technology and medications in India. It has become a preferred market for a lot of manufacturers now. So you would see a lot of scanning machines, availability of high-end drugs, precision medicine, genetic therapies, robotic surgeries coming in. While these are really expensive for the end patient, but the clinical outcomes of these services are way higher. The third one, I think, Chaiti, that I would want to probably bring in is gone are those days where hospitals were largely like dormitories, right? People now prefer hospitals and select them based upon the service and the facilities they have, the kind of single rooms that they have, whether they have also valet parking, home care services, and etc. Looking at, I think these three would be the core reasons why you see a lot of costs which have been really highly inflated in India.
Absolutely. How do you think, Amit, insurance has played a crucial factor here in safeguarding our pockets, our finances, given that the medical costs are rising exponentially? And especially with the pandemic, we've seen that.
I think this year has been quite a game changer when it comes to our thought process around how important health insurance is. So typically, before the pandemic struck, a lot of us used to think that health insurance is an optional purchase. That perception has completely changed now, and what's happened with COVID is that people have now realized that a large hospitalization expense can pretty much happen to anybody, to the young and healthy, to the elderly. And what would end up meaning is that a 5 to 10 lakh rupee expense is not something which just cannot happen. So it can happen to anybody and everybody right now. And what people are now realizing is that health insurance increasingly becomes a mandatory purchase, and it is something that you must buy for your peace of mind. I think that's one part. The other part is the lifestyle diseases, the likes of hypertension, diabetes, and even beyond that, things like cancer are now becoming more and more common. More and more young people, who were traditionally thought of as not being exposed to those are now getting exposed to those, and they are being made to spend a lot of money for those treatments. At the end of the day, what people are now realizing is it's a very small expense to get a very large coverage, which sort of gives you a lot of peace of mind. So that way, it is becoming more and more mandatory now for people to have.
And something we all should do. It's a rather very small expense, like you mentioned, for something that really looks after you. So it's just that we all owe it to ourselves, and especially if we have learnt any lessons in 2020 from the pandemic as well. Now, Abhay, you have experience running hospitals in the past. How important is an adequate health insurance plan to buy?
With the increasing lifestyle burden that is catched up within the Indian subcontinent because of our Western habits adaptability, I think insurance has become a lot more needed for us. The reason is because we've got patients where we were seeing patients with the age of 50, 55 getting heart attacks or cancer. But now, after closer to a decade, we see patients as young as about 40 suffering from all of this disease. Primarily, these are also the earning member of the family, which puts a lot of stress within the family since 60% of the medical expenses are out of pocket. On the hospital side, what also happened, if you go back and check the demonetization phase, was usually patients used to beg, borrow, or take a loan from a bank to usually suffice to the medical bills inflated. But now that's not the case with them because you cannot actually deposit cash more than 2 lakhs in the system. So by default, you'll see a lot of patients actually adopting for insurance because that's the easier part of it. I think, and the third reason that we see as a youngsters, while we all are working, the cost of our insurance is usually covered by the corporate insurance, but that's not the case with our parents. And actually, if you look at the virtue of the age, the actual patients are the parents and not us. So I think that's again another strong point where you see a lot of insurance adaptability for your seniority.
Abhay, you also deal a lot in lifestyle related diseases. Let's throw some light on that as well. One of them being diabetes. India accounts for approximately 49% of world's total diabetes patients, with an estimated 72 million people suffering from this disease in this country. What, according to you, Abhay, are the various types of diabetes prominent in India, the types, and how much does an average patient really end up spending on their healthcare in one lifetime if they are detected with diabetes?
Diabetics, we have usually three types of diabetes. First is type 1, which is usually
Yeah.
caused in adolescence where the pancreas stops producing insulin itself. Second one, which is the most prominent one, is diabetes, which is diabetes mellitus, which you call it as, where you have patients who are suffering from having resistance to the insulin which is being produced by their body, and the blood sugar has not been processed easily. This is largely related to the lifestyle that the patient is kind of. The third one is gestational diabetes. This is usually seen in pregnant women, but after pregnancy, it's kind of further away. The cost of the disease is usually broken in two things, Chaiti. The one bucket that you see is the maintenance of the disease itself. So
Yes.
this disease cannot be cured; it can only be controlled. That's probably a myth that people actually go towards, that this disease can be cured. So the preventive budget for maintaining this disease itself is pretty high, right? Now, while you leave all of this and it is not controlled, it leaves a serious implications of heart disease, kidney nephropathy, eye loss, and sometimes it also leads to physical inability where you'll have to actually amputate your leg. The cost that we see on the OPD basis usually comes to about 2 to 3 lakhs, but the overall cost that you would see when you neglect these diseases, it
Yeah.
goes to about 10 to 15 lakhs.
That's a lot. You know, so I'd like to take this across to Amit now. How does insurance cover diabetes? Abhay was highlighting how much it ends up costing and the kinds of diabetic patients and what they really need to do, because like he mentioned, there's no cure. It's largely preventive and managing the lifestyle disease as well. So can an existing diabetic patient get health insurance at all? And if yes, what is the process? And I have one more question to ask, because many people these days are going into alternative treatment as well, and they necessarily don't want to take the regular Western medication. So does the insurance cover all of that too?
Over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a lot of innovation that has happened around the health insurance space for diabetics. And as a result, practically now, if you're any form of diabetic, be it somebody who got diabetes say very early in their life, let's say at during childhood itself, you have diabetes for the last 20, 30 years and you've been taking medication, however bad it may be, you can today get a health insurance plan. So that is one problem solved. Everybody today can get a health insurance plan irrespective of how severe the diabetes is, and that plan will cover for the diabetes expenses. That is part one. Part two is when does diabetes start to get covered? So typically in health insurance, what happens is there is a waiting period for coverage of existing illnesses. And that obviously matters a lot to people who have diabetes, because you would want early coverage, right? You wouldn't want coverage after 4 years. You would want coverage to start as soon as possible. So again, even there are now options. You can buy insurance plans which cover for your diabetes from day one itself, or they may cover after 1 year or 2 year, 3 year or 4 years. So obviously you have to pay a price for it, but if you want, you can get plans which will cover for your diabetes from day one itself. So you don't have to wait for coverage for a long period of time. The third important thing is, how do you get this health insurance plan?
Yeah.
So there are three ways that you can get a policy. You can get it by answering a few questions through some self medical checkups. You can answer some questions on a simple proposal form, and it's decided that you get the policy instantly. So that practically means you can get a policy within 5 minutes, which gets you covered. There is the other option, which is called telemedicals, where a qualified doctor from an insurance company calls you and they ask you questions about your illness. So they will ask you things like, what is the dosage of the medicine that you take? How frequently do you take the medicine? Have you ever been hospitalized for diabetes? So on and so forth. Basic common man questions which anybody can answer.
Okay.
And based on that, the policy is issued. The third scenario also exists. So if you want to go to a medical checkup, that is also possible. But we are seeing now that very few customers do go for that, because of the comfort and the safety that you get at your home. Last thing, Chaiti, as you mentioned, so alternative treatments like Ayurveda, homeopathy, all of these are now covered in health insurance.
Oh, fantastic.
So if, let's say, you're using any of these treatments, and this is provided by the government of India through the Ministry of Ayush, uh, all of these get covered in your health insurance plan like any other treatment. So be it any Western mode of treatment or be it any of these alternative methods, everything gets covered for diabetes and for everything else as well.
So, well, then it's an absolute no-brainer that if one is diagnosed with this particular lifestyle disease, then taking insurance becomes all the more essential. It's time now for a short break on the Policy Bazaar show. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the Policy Bazaar show with me, Chaiti, Narula, and our guests, Amit Chhabra from Policybazaar.com and Abhay Singhvi from Healthians, join us on this broadcast. Today we are discussing health insurance, a must to combat rising medical costs. Now, continuing with the thread of lifestyle-related diseases, Abhay, to you first. Hypertension is a very common ailment in India. In fact, most people in India do not even consider it a disease at all. And it is very common to have hypertension for 15 to 20 years, I believe. So what kind of expenses does it typically entail in the long run for a hypertension patient?
Hypertension is also called as a silent killer. The reason why it is called is because for over years and years, close to a decade to half a decade, as you said, it's asymptomatic and suddenly the end is drastic. When I say the end is drastic, hypertension is actually known to cause heart attacks, chronic kidney disease, heart fibrillations, heart failures. And sometimes it also is coupled with, when it's coupled with diabetes, you are probably looking at a way higher medical bills that you're coughing up at the end of close to end of your life.
Yeah.
You look at somewhere close to an OPD management about 1.5 to 2 lakhs to manage the diabetes, which is a combination of periodic consultation and diagnosis and medical management. But when you are looking at a disease coverage, it would probably grow close to about 15 lakhs to 20 lakhs.
So let's take this across with Amit. Amit, we've seen the costs are quite high. So how easy or difficult does it become to get a policy for hypertensive patients? And what are the typical coverages and waiting periods that, firstly, what are the typical coverages available and what is the waiting period for each of them looking like?
Sure. So hypertension is actually one of the most accepted PEDs or pre-existing diseases in health insurance. What that means is all the plans cover for it, and not just for it, but yeah, anything which comes as a result of hypertension, all of that also gets covered. Waiting period again becomes an important point, because unfortunately, historically India has not had a lot of customers buying health insurance before getting diseases, and a lot of people get scared and then they buy a health insurance plan. So again, the rules remain the same as for diabetes. You can get plans which cover for hypertension from day one itself. Whereas again, you can, depending upon how early the coverage you want, you can get plans which cover after the first year, second year, or fourth year, depending upon which options you opt for. So it's almost like a menu pricing that there is, and depending upon what coverage, how early do you want the coverage, you can get the health insurance plan accordingly.
Abhay, heart patients are typically scared of large expenses because you have bypass surgeries, angioplasty. What are the kind of expenses, Abhay, do you typically foresee for a chronic heart patient?
When it comes to heart, we should not just look at it as a surgical cost to keep in mind. If you look at the heart, you should look at the whole curative ecosystem that it comes with. In heart, you have four basically ecosystems of cure. One is preventive, interventional, surgical, and rehab. When you look at preventive is largely where you get your test done again and again to ensure that you are healthy and keep healthy. Where people cough up close to about 20 to 45,000 per year. This also includes your CT angios, which are non-invasive. The second ones are interventional, where you know that you need to get an angiography done. Usually, here young adults, which we've been seeing in the hospital nowadays, where you get an angiography done and immediately you're going for an angioplasty. This comes to close to about 2.5 to 3 lakhs. Surgical, where this is bypass surgery or valve replacement or electrophysiology, procedures, here you're looking at a staggering 3 to 5 lakhs is what it is. Cumulatively, when you get any of these treatments done, you have to go through a complete rehab profile, which probably would have you along with medical management throughout the whole of your life and couple of exercise activities that you'll run, which you're looking at a total bill of about 10 lakhs to 15 lakhs for heart. Typically, these heart-related procedures are angioplasty, but the generally the significant outlay is very, very high in the following years as you go by.
Let me bring Amit on this as well. Heart patients typically believe that they just can't get a health insurance policy now that they've been diagnosed with this. Is that correct?
It was correct till the last probably 5 years, but things have changed a lot now. So what happens is a typical comprehensive health insurance plan would mostly not onboard a heart patient because the risk is very high, because there is almost guaranteed expenditure coming in the future years, and a fairly large expense at that. So now what's happened is, for existing heart patients, let's say somebody who's already had an angioplasty done, or let's say a bypass surgery done, they can actually get health insurance plans. These are plans specifically designed for heart patients. So simple example, there's a plan called Care Heart by Care Health Insurance. There's a plan called Cardiac Care by Star Health. These are plans specifically designed for heart patients who have already had some surgeries or treatments in the past. What typically these plans cover for is the heart related expenses that may happen in the future. They also cover you for anything else that can potentially happen. Mind you, these plans do come with limitations for sure. So these plans would have co-payments or sublimits, which means they won't be completely covering for all the expenditure, but they would cover for, let's say, 80% of the expenditure that may happen for your medical treatments.
So now let's take this across with both our guests. There are over 120 million smokers in India. That's about 12% of the world's smokers. What are the most common conditions that people suffer from the usage of tobacco? And how does health insurance work in case of smokers?
Active smoking in India causes direct problem with the lung side, which is lung problems come at more on the side of COPD, bronchitis, asthma, interstitial lung disease, etc. However, the passive smoking, also with kind of having a family member next to you while you're smoking, causes the same for them. But direct smoking to you on the cancer side, which takes up maximum load, is your oral cancer, which starts from your food and mouth and then starts to almost causing it a lung cancer. Here, the treatment cost that you're looking for smoking directly on the respiratory management side is close to about 2 to 3 lakhs per year. But if it is cancer, then you're looking at a shoot up bill of over 10 to 15 lakhs. But the end stage treatment for usually lung diseases is lung transplant, which can go to about 50 lakhs.
Right. Amit, what's your take on this?
From a health insurance coverage perspective, so smoking, luckily, is covered. If you're a smoker, you are covered practically in all
Yeah.
health insurance plans. What you have to do is you have to declare the level of smoking when you're buying a health insurance
Okay.
policy. Typically, if you smoke, 10 to 20 cigarettes a day, that is pretty much, which is a fairly large number, just to put across. But that is typically acceptable across most health insurance plans. So the good news for if you're a smoker is that most health insurance plans will accept you, and they will cover you for anything that happens as a result of the smoking as well.
So then
Not
if
a
you're
great
living in a
habit,
polluted
definitely.
city like Delhi, then you just have to double the number?
So yeah, I was about to say, not really promoting smoking, of course, but yes, at least you're safe from a health insurance coverage perspective. And the other interesting thing, which is different in health insurance compared to say term insurance, is the cost remains exactly the same. So typically, if you're buying a life insurance policy, your cost differs by quite a bit if you're a smoker versus a non-smoker. In health insurance, that is not the case. So you actually end up getting covered at the same price as a non-smoker as well.
Well, that brings us to the end of this show. If I could ask Amit to quickly tell us, what should a consumer and a customer keep in mind while buying the perfect health insurance policy? And is there anything even like a perfect health insurance policy?
Well, yes, there is actually one. See, there are three, four things to keep in mind. First is the sum insured, and that is probably half of the decision making to be done. What is the sum insured that you want to buy? As we heard, there are diseases, there are treatments which can cost you as much as 40, 50 lakh rupees in a year also. So you must invest in adequate health insurance plan which covers you for treatments like these. Today you have plans which can give you coverage up to 1 crore rupees at a very affordable price. They'll cost you about 1,000 rupees a month only, but they get you coverage for 1 crore rupees every year. The second thing is, what kind of features do you want? Like, for example, do you want a plan which has no room rent capping versus a plan which has a room rent capping? There are cost implications, but you would always want to be treated in privacy at a good hospital, so that again you're rest assured that you're being treated at the right place. You would not want any limitations like co-payments or sublimits, because you don't want to be spending out of pocket when you're already ill. So you must take a plan which has no co-payment, and 100% of the expenses are borne by the insurance company and they don't come to you. The last important thing is, which insurance company do you want to go for? So you would want to go with the company which you trust, and the easiest way to judge that is to look at the claim settlement ratio of the company. That means, of 100 claims that a company received, how many did they
Yeah.
pay off back to the customer? The higher the claim settlement ratio, the better it is. So today, if you're buying a policy from Policybazaar as an example, you can actually compare across insurance companies, look at their claim settlement ratios, and then decide which company to go for. Based on the higher the claim settlement ratio, the better it is, the more the peace of mind that you have.
Well, with that, it's all that we have for you this week. Thank you so much, Abhay Singhvi and Amit Chhabra, for joining us today. Keep watching the Policy Bazaar show. This is Chaiti Narula signing off.